Welcome, brave soul, I am the forgotten storyteller. Before we begin, tap that like button if you dare, and drop a comment below telling me where in the world you're listening from. And if you make it to the end of this video, I hope to see you in the next story. I hope you're ready, because I am. Let's begin. Not every predator has fangs. Not every hunter stalks with claws. Sometimes it hums. Sometimes it waits in the garden, in the meadow, in the quiet hum of summer air, watching you, tasting you, preparing you for the harvest. Our story today begins in a countryside that most would call picturesque. Rolling hills clothed in green, meadows shimmering with wildflowers, skies so endlessly blue that city dwellers often stop their cars on the narrow lanes just to breathe it all in. Sheep wandered the fields, crows nested in the oak trees, and for the villagers of Ashwick Hollow, life moved at the slow, syrupy pace of tradition. A place untouched by the frantic pulse of modern life. But nestled just beyond the last lane, hidden behind a crooked stone wall and rows of warning signs that read, "No trespassing," stood a cottage unlike any other. Its windows were narrow, its slate roof sagged, and its garden was alive with sound. Not the sound of laughter or children or the usual country chatter. No, it was the sound of hives. Dozens upon dozens of them. Tall wooden boxes painted in muted grays and deep browns, each one vibrating with thousands of wings. Together they sang a single note, low, steady, endless. This was the domain of Elias Thorn, the village's beekeeper. Or, as the children whispered, the keeper of the hive. Elias was a man of 57, though time had weathered him into something older. His beard was iron gray, his skin worn and papery, and his clothes, always black, always heavy even in summer, gave him the look of a mourner who never stopped grieving. He spoke rarely, and when he did, his voice carried the strange softness of someone who preferred whispers. The villagers did not understand him. They bought his honey, yes. It was rich, dark, almost intoxicating, but they never lingered on his doorstep. For all his silence, Elias was never alone. Wherever he walked, the bees seemed to follow. Children who peeked through the slats of his wooden fence swore they saw him tilt his head to the hives and murmur, as though he were confiding secrets, prayers, maybe even instructions. They dared each other to run up and touch his gate, and some did, but always with terror clinging to their backs. Yet every spring, when his jars of honey appeared at the market, they vanished in days. People said it was the purest honey in the county. Strong, dark, almost addictive. They said it made them dream strange dreams. But no one asked what made it so different. Elias Thorn was not entirely hidden away. Once a month, when the hives buzzed thick with life, he opened his gates to students. Outsiders, mostly city folk wanting to learn the gentle craft of beekeeping. They paid in cash, they signed strange waivers, and then they stepped inside. For 5 years the routine went on. And for 5 years something else happened. People vanished. Not all at once, not every month, but 7 names, 7 faces simply disappeared. Their cars were found. Their families searched. The police interviewed Elias. But there were no bodies, no evidence, no reason to hold him. And still the flyers appeared, learn the ancient art of apiculture. Small class, limited spots. The villagers whispered, "He's a witch. He feeds them. The bees eat them alive." But whispers are not proof. And proof in Ashwick Hollow never seemed to last. Enter Mara Reyes, 28. A journalist from the city who had written her share of exposés and environmental pieces. She'd heard of the thorn and hive honey, tasted it once in a cafe, and found it strangely bitter, strangely unforgettable. When she uncovered the old police reports of missing students, her instincts sparked. This wasn't just a story about bees. This was a story about a man hiding something. She signed up under a false name, using cash just as the flyer instructed. She carried with her 2 things Elias would never see: a voice recorder sewn into the lining of her jacket, and a tiny pinhole camera disguised as a button on her shirt. On a morning thick with dew, Mara walked the narrow lane to Thorn's cottage. As she approached, the air itself seemed to vibrate. The buzzing was constant, layered, almost human in its rhythm. Her pulse quickened. And then she saw him, Elias, standing in the garden, veiled in his black beekeeping mask, gloved hands stroking the side of a hive as if calming a restless animal. When he turned toward her, Mara swore she saw something move inside the mesh of his veil. Not his face, but a shadow. It was like a ripple. And then he spoke, gentle and quiet. "Welcome. The hive has been waiting." Mara's first impression was unsettling. Elias was precise, almost tender as he spoke about the bees. He explained the structure of a colony, the role of the queen, the loyalty of the workers. His hands moved without hesitation, dipping into the hive, lifting frames alive with crawling insects, brushing them aside as though they were extensions of his own body. The other students, 3 of them tourists with notebooks, watched nervously, flinching at every wing beat. Mara, meanwhile, recorded everything. But one hive stood apart from the others. Black, taller, sealed with a heavy padlock. Mara asked about it, pretending curiosity. Elias only tilted his head. "That one is not for you," he murmured. "Not yet." Later, as the group left for the day, Mara glanced back at the black hive. Its hum was different. Not just louder, but deeper. Like something vast breathing through wood. And when she leaned close, just for a second, the bees inside went silent. Completely silent. As though listening. That evening, Mara returned to her rented cottage and began reviewing the day's footage. Elias's voice, calm and soothing. The students' nervous laughter. And faintly, beneath it all, the droning of wings. Yet the audio revealed something else. Moments when Elias's lips barely moved, but the recorder caught whispers. Words she couldn't quite decipher. A language that was neither English nor gibberish, but something older, something that crawled beneath the skin when she played it back. She began digging deeper. In an old newspaper archive, she found a story about a missing woman from 3 years ago, a student of Elias's classes. Days before she vanished, she had written to her sister, "He comes to my window at night. I swear he's watching me sleep. And the bees don't sting him." The letter had never been taken seriously. Mara knew she had stumbled onto something darker than she imagined. The next class, Mara studied Elias closely. His eyes lingered on her longer than the others. He asked fewer questions as though he already knew her answers. The black hive loomed behind him, its lock glinting in the sun. That night, when Mara dreamed, she woke to the faintest sound. A buzzing, not in her room, not outside, but inside her ears. She stumbled to the mirror, half mad with panic, and found nothing. Only the echo of wings that faded as the dawn broke. And yet, when she checked her camera, she saw it. A single bee crawling across the lens as she slept. It vanished before she could swat it. Elias Thorn had been in her room. And Mara Reyes, for all her bravery, had only just stepped into the hive. On the third class, Mara found herself alone with Elias. The other students had dropped out, citing family emergencies and illness. She didn't believe them. Their sudden exits had the smell of fear, of instinct screaming before reason could explain. That afternoon, Elias walked her along the row of hives. His voice was softer than ever, almost hypnotic. "Do you hear it?" he asked. Mara nodded, though she wasn't sure what he meant. "The hive speaks. Not in words, you know, but in hunger, in need." They stopped before the black hive. Elias rested a gloved hand upon it, stroking the wood as though it were warm flesh. "This one is different. A stronger breed. Most cannot understand it. But you," he paused, eyes glinting through the veil. "You might." Mara forced herself to ask, her tone steady, "What's inside?" "Sacrifice," he whispered. "Perfection always requires sacrifice." The lock shimmered with the wetness of old fingerprints. The hive thrummed louder, and Mara swore she felt it through her bones. She leaned closer just for a heartbeat. And the bees, thousands of them, pressed against the inside wall as one, a living wave waiting for a command. Elias pulled her back. His grip was iron. "Not yet," he murmured. "They don't know you, not fully." Back at her cottage that night, Mara scoured scientific articles. Crossbreeding. Hybrids. She stumbled upon case studies of Africanized honeybees, infamous killer bees bred accidentally decades ago. They were known for their aggression, their pursuit of prey for miles, their swarming to the death. The articles spoke of them as uncontrollable. Yet Elias had control. He had modified them. The realization froze her blood. These weren't ordinary bees. These weren't even natural. They were soldiers. Intelligent, relentless, bound to Elias's command. And she remembered his words, "Sacrifice always requires sacrifice." That night, Mara couldn't sleep. She followed her instincts, slipping out of her rented cottage to shadow Elias. She stayed far behind, her breath clouding in the cold, her recorder hidden in her pocket. Through the hedges, she saw him approach a small house at the village's edge. He carried a wooden box no bigger than a bread loaf. He stopped at the door. Mara crouched in the brush, her pulse hammering. Elias reached into his coat and withdrew a long, thin metal rod. He slid it into the letterbox on the door, propping it open with a slow, practiced motion. Then, gently, lovingly, he opened the box. From within, a swarm poured out. Not loud, not wild, but deliberate. They streamed into the letterbox like thick black smoke. Mara's throat closed. She knew what was happening. The swarm slipped into the house, unseen by its sleeping occupants. First silent infiltration, then death. Elias waited in the dark, patient, until the last stragglers buzzed back through the slot, crawling obediently into the box once more. He closed it, tucked the rod away, and walked into the night as though nothing had happened. Mara bit her lip to keep from screaming. She had just witnessed a murder. A murder carried out not with knives nor guns but with wings. The next day Mara risked everything. While Elias was out tending the hives, she slipped into the cottage. The air smelled of smoke and honey. Every surface was meticulous, the shelves lined with jars so dark they looked like blood in glass. But beneath the house, in the cellar, she found it. A shrine. Rows of glass cases, each holding an object. A watch, a scarf, a leather-bound notebook, a silver bracelet. Items that belonged to the vanished. Above each case, nailed to the stone wall, was a photograph. Faces smiling, unaware. Each marked with a date. And beneath the date, a single word carved into the stone. Harvested. Mara's stomach turned. She pressed her recorder tighter to her chest, forcing herself to document everything. And then, she heard the hum. The cellar walls trembled. From cracks in the stone, from the rafters above, bees seeped out in trickles, watching her with alien patience. Not attacking. Not yet. Just waiting. She fled before the swarm could grow. But as she left, she noticed one jar on the shelf glowing faintly in the candlelight. She lifted it. Inside the honey, suspended like amber, was something small. An eyelid. Was human. Preserved in golden resin. That night, Mara could not shake the feeling of being followed. Every time she turned, she thought she saw him, Elias, watching from behind the tree line, his veil glinting, his body motionless. And when she returned to her cottage, she froze. The letterbox. It was open. Just a crack. Her breath hitched. She dropped to the floor, flashlight trembling in her hand, and scanned the room. At first, nothing. And then she heard it, the faint, crawling rustle of wings inside the walls. She stuffed towels under the doors, taped the letterbox shut, sprayed insecticide blindly into the air. Hours passed. The buzzing faded. But when dawn came, she found something on her kitchen table. Not left by her. Not there before. A jar of thorn and hive honey. The label smudged, sticky as though touched by gloved hands. And beneath it, a note in Elias's elegant handwriting. The hive has chosen. You are next. Mara knew she had enough evidence now to go to the police. But what would she tell them? That bees were the murder weapon? That a man commanded them like dogs? That the proof was sealed in jars of honey and whispers caught on tape? They'd laugh. They'd call her paranoid. And meanwhile, Elias would strike again. She needed something undeniable. She needed to catch him in the act. Her chance came sooner than she expected. At the next and final class, Elias announced that the students would stay overnight at the apiary to witness the nocturnal rhythm of the hive. It was tradition, he said. The culmination of the lessons. Mara's blood ran cold. She knew what it meant. She had read the missing student's journal, the one who vanished after writing. He watches me sleep. And Mara knew this would be her night. The harvest was coming. And once the hive chooses you, there is no running. The night of the final class arrived, thick with mist. The moon hung low, veiled in clouds, its pale light spilling weakly across the meadow. Mara walked with the last two remaining students toward Elias's cottage. They laughed nervously, backpacks slung over their shoulders, treating it like an adventure. But Mara knew better. She could feel it. The hum in the air. Stronger now, vibrating through the earth itself. Every step closer to the hives felt like stepping deeper into something alive, something watching. Elias greeted them at the gate. He was dressed in black as always, but his veil was missing. For the first time, Mara saw his face in full. His eyes were pale gray, unblinking, the color of ash after a fire. His lips curved, not quite into a smile, but into something that suggested possession. Tonight, he said softly, you will witness their truest form. Few are ever allowed to see. He led them into the apiary. Lanterns hung from posts, their dim flames painting the hives in flickering gold. The students were led to small cots set up between the boxes. Mara sat on hers, her recorder hidden beneath her pillow, every muscle taut. Elias moved among the hives like a priest tending an altar. He murmured, touched the wood, lifted lids just enough to let the night air flow in. The bees answered. The collective hum rose and fell like breath. Hours passed. The other students drifted into uneasy sleep. Mara pretended to join them, eyes half shut, watching through her lashes. At midnight, Elias picked up a box. The same kind Mara had seen him use at the house. He cradled it like an infant. Then he walked away into the trees. Mara followed. She stayed far back, her recorder still running. The woods were damp, every leaf slick with dew, every branch trembling as if afraid. Elias walked with purpose until he reached a small cottage at the forest's edge. Mara crouched low as he knelt by the door. She knew what was coming. She had seen it before. The rod, the letterbox, the slow, patient opening. And then, the bees. This time she heard them clearly. A whispering swarm, sliding into the house, their sound almost human in its cadence. The whisper grew, became a chorus, and within seconds, faint muffled screams rose from inside. The bees roared. Elias simply stood, head tilted, lips moving in silent prayer. Minutes later, the swarm streamed back out, glistening with something wet, their bodies smeared in crimson. They funneled obediently into the box. Mara's breath broke into sharp bursts. She had it, proof undeniable. Audio, perhaps even images if her camera caught the scene. She had everything she needed. But then Elias turned. His eyes met hers through the dark. He did not shout. He did not chase. He simply walked toward her. Mara froze, every nerve screaming to run. She stumbled backward through the trees, branches clawing at her arms. Her recorder slipped from her pocket, landing in the dirt. She left it, heart hammering. By the time she burst back into the apiary clearing, Elias was already there, waiting. He stood between her and the gate, veil lowered once more over his face. His voice, when it came, was calm. Too calm. You've seen what you were never meant to see. You've walked with them. Listen to me now, you belong to them. He raised one gloved hand. The black hive shuddered. The sound that followed was not a hum, was a scream. Thousands of wings thrashing, wood rattling as if the hive itself were tearing apart. The padlock snapped, the lid burst upward, and a storm poured out. A swarm, black and endless, rising into the night. Mara ran. She had no choice. She crashed through the meadow, lanterns toppling behind her. The swarm followed, an avalanche of wings. They crawled beneath her clothes, into her hair, against her eyes. She swatted, screamed, stumbled. The cottage loomed ahead. She dove inside, slamming the door. For a moment, silence. Then the letterbox creaked. Elias's rod slid through. Slowly, patiently. The buzzing built again, louder, closer, until the first bees trickled through the slot, landing on her skin, her face. She grabbed a chair and hurled it through the window, glass exploding outward. She leapt through the shards, cutting her arms, sprinting into the woods with blood streaming down her skin. Behind her, the swarm poured after her like smoke chasing fire. The forest became a labyrinth. Every path seemed to hum with wings. The swarm was not just following, it was hurting her, pushing her toward something. Branches whipped her face. Roots clawed at her ankles. She stumbled again and again, each time catching herself just before she fell. The buzzing was deafening now, filling her skull, drowning out her thoughts. She reached her car at the edge of the lane. Her hands shook as she jammed the key into the ignition. The engine coughed, roared to life. She slammed the accelerator. But the windshield darkened. Not with rain. With bees. Thousands of them, slamming against the glass, crawling across it, blotting out the night. Her screams drowned in the storm of wings. By the time the police arrived, summoned by a frantic, broken phone call, they found the car idling at the edge of the forest. The windshield cracked, the hood plastered with dead bees. Inside, the driver's seat was empty. But on the passenger seat sat a recorder, still running. The final audio began with Mara's panicked voice. Her sobs. The frantic slam of the accelerator. And then silence, followed by another voice. Elias's. It was calm and gentle, whispering as though into the listener's ear. They always come back to me. The hive takes what it needs, and it is never satisfied. The recording ended with a sound, not static, not distortion, but the low, endless hum of wings, growing louder and closer, as though inside the listener's own head. When the police raided Elias's property, they found nothing. No bees, no bodies, not a single hive remained. The cottage stood empty, shelves bare. The cellar's shrine, gone, as though it had never existed. Only the black hive remained, toppled in the meadow, its lid wide open, empty, silent. Elias Thorn had vanished. Months later, in the nearby town of Dunsworth, a flyer appeared on a corkboard outside a grocer's. Handwritten, elegant script. Learn the art of apiculture. Small class. Limited spots. Cash only. A young student tore off a tab, pocketing it. She smiled, already imagining herself in a veil, tending the quaint little hives. As she walked home that evening, her letterbox creaked. Just a crack. They spoke of Elias Thorn long after his cottage stood empty. For the villagers of Ashwick Hollow, his absence was a relief, but an uneasy one. Relief because the gates no longer rattled with the hum of swarms. Relief because the market stalls no longer sold honey that tasted of something too dark. Uneasy because the silence that followed was not peace. It was waiting. The older folk, those who remembered whispers from their grandparents, began muttering once more. Stories that had lived in the cracks of memory, stories most thought were drunken fireside nonsense. They said the land Elias lived on was not his by chance. That long before his stone cottage stood, before Ashwick Hollow had its first church bell, that meadow was a place of offerings. A place where wild hives grew as tall as men, where bees gathered in black clouds so thick they eclipsed the sun. The villagers of centuries past did not tend the bees. They feared them, and so they fed them. Each harvest, a lamb, a goat, sometimes more. Blood spilt on wildflowers to keep the swarms at bay. The bees, they said, were not ordinary insects. They were spirits, ancient, watchful, carrying souls between worlds on their trembling wings. Spirits that demanded tribute to weave honey sweet enough to preserve the balance between the living and the dead. But time had made such rituals unfashionable, forgotten. Until Elias. And Elias remembered. In the months after his disappearance, strange reports drifted through neighboring towns. A hiker stung to death miles from any known hive. A farmer who woke to find his cattle suffocated, throats clogged with stingers. But strangest of all were the disappearances. A pattern that stretched outward like rings in water. One missing in Dunsworth, another in Little Fun. Always after a flyer appeared. Always after someone took an interest in the mysterious beekeeper who taught old-world apiculture. And in every case, their homes told the same story. The letterbox, left open. Just a crack. Soon the disappearances grew so frequent that locals began whispering again, this time with conviction. They no longer said Elias Thorn was a man. They said Elias Thorn was chosen. Chosen to carry the hive within him. To spread it. To walk between village and wilderness, summoning swarms that no flame, no smoke, no prayer could drive away. A priest of wings. A shepherd of stingers. A keeper. And what of Mara Reyes, the brave journalist who came seeking truth? Her name faded into the archives of the police, dismissed as another tragic accident. An allergic reaction, a swarm attack. Her recorder was filed away, forgotten in some evidence box, labeled without context. But those who dared listen to it could never shake the sound. Not just Elias's voice, not just the swarm, but Mara herself, her final breaths, layered strangely beneath the hum. As though her voice had not ended when her body did. As though it had joined the hive. Years later, a boy walking home from school in a distant county swore he saw a figure at the edge of the woods. A man in black, his face covered by a veil. In his hands, a jar of honey that glistened dark red beneath the twilight. The boy blinked and the figure was gone. But when he got home, he found something waiting. A flyer, taped to the inside of his front door. Learn the art of apiculture. Small class, limited spots, cash only. And beneath the flyer, the letterbox shifted. Creaked. Open, just a crack. The illusion of rural innocence shattered. Nature corrupted by obsession, fulfilled. The horror of the unseen, embodied. Sacrifice in the name of perfection, eternal. For in Ashwick Hollow and beyond, the hive is no longer confined to wood and wax. It breathes in whispers. It waits in shadows. It carries itself in jars, in flyers, in letterboxes. And once chosen, there is no escape. Because the hive is patient. The hive is eternal. The hive always remembers. You may think this is just a story. A tale spun from whispers and fear. But tonight, when you return home, pause at your front door. Look at your letterbox. Is it closed? Are you sure? Listen closely. Not to me. Not to the wind. But to the hum. Because if you hear it, low, steady, endless, then it is already too late. The hive has found you. And it is hungry. You made it to the end of this story. Thank you for your time. If you did enjoy the story, please don't forget to leave a like and please consider subscribing to the channel. It's totally free and then you won't miss out on any of our uploads.
Ready for spine-chilling tales that will haunt your thoughts.
Subscribe to Forgotten Storyteller for eerie narrations, unsettling mysteries, and haunting stories you won't forget. Hit the bell icon so you never miss a story, because some stories refuse to stay buried. Join us, if you dare.